Okay, this is a follow-up to my conversation with Skyla, who's trying to make a puzzle where the pieces get dragged around and snap into place when you drag them close to where they're supposed to be. Drag and drop them close to where they're supposed to be. So this is not different than the other things that I was showing with drag and drop in the previous videos. And so we have a container. I will keep it simple, and instead of putting an image, I'll just use a constant top. I'll make that the background, and I'll just change its color so it's like orange. So what I want is to be able to drag this around. So the first thing I need to do is go under Panel and choose Drag to Reposition Component. Now I can drag it, but it's in a very limited area. So I'll change the range here to just some absurd number. Anything between -2000 and 2000 in either direction is okay. So now I can drag it wherever I want. So the next thing is, how do I know when I've dropped it? And to do that, we've been using a panel chop. They're all different channels here associated with whatever operator is linked here. So what we want is not this parent component, but we want this one called container one. I'll just change this to a constant instead of a formula, and I'll just type in container one. Okay, I'm only interested in one particular channel here, which is the one that tells me whether I'm dragging it or not, and it's called reposition. So now if I drag and drop this, you'll see it goes from 1 as I'm dragging to 0 when I stop dragging. So what I'm going to do is add a chop exec here, and that is going to call a bit of Python when I go from 1 to 0. So let's do that. 1 to 0 is on to off. I will uncheck value change. I'm not interested in that. I'm really specifically interested in this moment when it goes from on to off. So I'll delete all the other chunks of code here, the other functions. So when it goes from on to off, I want to do a couple things. One is, well, the first thing is I just want to see if it was dropped in the right place. So what I can do, I guess, is like, let's say I want to have it snap to the middle. So let's look at what is the middle. When I go to layout here, it seems to be, I think when you're all the way over here, it's 0 in the X orientation, and way over here is 1280 in that orientation. So I can't just say half, because if I said 620, 640, then it would be over here, because it starts at the beginning of the container. But you know what? I don't want to fuss with this, so I'm just going to say, yeah, that's right. So if I want the ending landing position to be 650 in the X orientation. And then the Y orientation, I don't know, it looks fine where it is. So I'll just say like 215. So the X is 650, the Y is 215. That is the ideal place for it. Now, if you dragged it anywhere between like 570 and 750 in the X orientation, then it should accept that as like a good placement. And then the same here, it'll be anything from like 125 to 260. 125 to 260. I'm just doing this by eye, but you could be a little more scientific about it. So as long as it's anywhere in that area, it should just snap right into place. So what I'm going to do is check in the code to see if that's where it landed. And I can do that by just checking this same thing that I'm looking at here, these X and Y parameters of the container. So the first thing is, I know I'm going to be referencing this container a lot, and I don't want to have to type the long op function way that I get to it. So I'll just make a variable called C so it stays short, and I will make this the container operator. So I'm looking up the operator called container one. And then what I'm going to do is say if a parameter in that container is, X, the X parameter in that container is greater than 570, and it's also less than 750, and in the other direction, the Y direction, it's greater than 125, and in that same Y direction, it's less than 260. If all of that is true, then I'm going to do two things. One is I want to make this not movable anymore. The easiest way to do that, I think, is if I go under panel here, there's an enable parameter. So far I've been reading the parameters, but I can also change parameters from Python. So I'm going to say for that same container operator, I want to change its enable parameter to be 0. And the last thing I want to do is put it in the right place. So again, I've been looking at X and Y parameters, but I can actually set them. So I can say c.parameter.x equals, what's the ideal location? 650, and Y is 215. So if I drag this around, it's always good to make sure you can see the end corner of this, because if this is dragged over here, you can't see if there's an error. So the error little X will show up here. So let's make sure we don't have any errors. Dragging it everywhere, but if I drag it close to the middle, you can see it snaps there. Or not the middle, but in the location that I've given it. So at this point, it's stuck there until I turn enable on again. But you can see like dragging and dropping over here doesn't do anything, but if I drop it there, it snaps into place. So that's what we want. Now, how do you do this for a bunch of pieces? My thought was that you could actually use a table maybe to keep track of these. So I think the worst case is you just copy and paste these four many times, and then you change the numbers in each of these scripts, including this, right? Like it would have to correspond to the right container. Totally doable. But when I was talking to Skyla, I thought, hey, maybe we can use a table to do this. And I'm not totally convinced, but let's see. So I'm going to add, I mean, I know we can, but it may just be more of a hassle than it's worth. We'll have to see. So here's a table, and I'm going to say that it's actually got a specific size to it. So let me just give it like 6 rows. Why not? And then the columns, I'm going to have the X and Y position, all the stuff I've been typing in here, X and Y, and then like a range for the X. So like minimum X, maximum X, and then minimum Y, maximum Y. So that's 4 pieces of information I have to keep track of. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces of information, plus maybe like the name of the piece or the color of the piece, let's say in this case. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's say 7 columns. And then we'll edit this and put names to these. So what's the color of this one? And then what's its X and Y location, ideally? And then what's the minimum X that's acceptable for dragging? And then the maximum X. And then the minimum Y location and the max Y. Okay. So for this first one, it is orange. And we decided that its ideal location was 650 and 215. The minimum that we could accept was like 570 in the X, and 750 was the max. And then in the Y orientation, it was between 125 and 260. So this should be all the information that we need to use it in this Python. So let's see if we can make that happen. So this is called table 1 over here. So maybe in the same way that I made a variable for the container, maybe I'll make a variable for the table. This is operator table 1. And anywhere that I would reference the number, instead, I will reference the table. So it's table, and then I think it's just brackets with the row number. So it's row 1, not row 0. Row 0 is the headings. So row 1, and this I can put the column number here, but I can also, because I've got headings here, I can put the actual name of the column in quotes. So this should be min-x. And let me just copy and paste this, which I'm sure will cause me a problem. Let's see, max X. And this is min Y and max Y. This is not really the place to be editing this, but that's all right. This will be max Y. Okay, so that seems fine. And then also here, I can get the actual preferred X and Y from here. So ideally, this works exactly like it did before, and all we've done is add a little extra work because we've got a separate table to maintain now. I don't know, or maybe this is better, right? Because you actually can see all the numbers. You don't have to edit the code. Let's see. So I will go over to the parameters here. I will enable this again, dragging it around. Again, make sure you can see the edge of this Python, this text chop exec operator over here, because that's where the errors will show up. Otherwise, you'll be wondering why it's not working. So that seems like it's working exactly the same. Now, this doesn't quite work now if I copy and paste these, because let's do that. Let's copy and paste. And we'll make this one a different color, blue. I mean, it's still, let's click on this container and make it draggable. I guess I can make them both draggable. So they do, draggable. Okay, they do both work, but this one doesn't, well, it doesn't have a, it doesn't quite work, right? Because in here, this is called container 2, and in the script, we're still looking at container 1. So we'd have to change container 1 to 2 here, which is not that bad. So you could say, hey, that's an improvement. I've got 2 here. I'll call this one blue, and I will say its X and Y ideally is 0, 0, and I can take anything from, let's say 0 to 100 and 0 to 100. So I can change this to container 2, and this should work. Let's see. So anything in this corner? No, where are we? What corner? Let's see. Is this going to work? I think this will work. Let's look at the X and Y. Looking at the X and Y of the blue one. So anything between 0 and 100 and a Y of 0 and 100. We want to be over here, right? 0. Well, it should be snapping. We're getting an error? We're not getting an error. Why isn't it working? Okay, so container 2, we've got a min and max. Well, the problem is that we're still referencing row number 1 of the table. Everywhere you see a 1 here. Okay, so what can we do? I think one thing we could do is say, let's get a number. I'm calling these very short names, which maybe isn't ideal, but I'll just I for index. What I could do is say, give me, for container 2, or for C, right, which is container 2, give me its name, but just the numeric part of it. And for everything here, we can use I instead of 1. So I think we're incrementally making this better, but I think there's still more to go. But let's see. So I here. Let's see if this works. Yeah, it's working, right? And this one, we could take the same code that's here, copy and paste it into here, and just make sure we're referencing container 1. So there is only one place that we have to change code now. Can we get it to where we don't actually have to change anything? Could we just get the container number from here and the code would be the same thing? It would just get the number from whatever container it's connected to? Maybe. So I think the panel has the container number, has the container name, right? Container 1. It's in a parameter called component. So I think maybe if we were to say, instead of strictly saying it's container 1, what if we said get the container name from the parameters of the thing that I'm attached to, panel? I think we can do me.parameter.component. Don't know if that'll work. Let's see. I'll need to make this enabled again. Doesn't seem to be working. Okay, let's see what this says if I just do like debug C. I'll open the text port and getting some errors. No? What am I? Oh, I'm getting the actual component. So it is a component. Project. Oh. Okay. It's not the thing that I think. So me.parameter.component is not what I want. I think. Okay. So there's some way that I can tell which. Okay. Here we go. The chop that I'm connected to is panel 1. And panel 1 is connected to container 1. So I do feel like I can get all the bits I need. So let me do this just to make it, there's probably a more concise way to do this, but let's say P is the panel that this chop exec is connected to. It's going to be operator. No, I can just do, yeah, operator. No. Me. This chop exec. Me.parameter.panel1. sorry, dot chop. Right, is that the name of the parameter? Chop. Okay, so that should give me the string, not the operator, but the string panel1, Panel1, not the actual operator. For that, I'd actually have to put in op here. So let me do that. Op. Okay, let's see if this, okay, no errors. That's good. So I've got the parameter that I want here. And the channel should be the parameter from here that, sorry, not the channel, the container that I'm addressing in all these, I'm going to get it from the component parameter of the panel. It's a little silly, but panel.parameter.component. Is this going to work? It's working. So if we look down here, there is a difference. You can see before it was referencing project 1. Now it's referencing chop exec 1. So I think we've got it right. So let's look at that again. First thing I'm doing is, this hasn't changed. I'm always looking at the same table. So table 1 in here is perfect. But I want to know which panel chop is connected to this chop exec. And to do that, I can just look at the parameters of the chop exec. And there it is. There it is. The chop parameter of this chop exec is telling me that it's connected to panel 1. So I just store that in a variable called p. And then eventually, though, I want the actual component because that's where the x and y are and the enable parameters are all from. So for that, I can look at the panel chop to see what it is referencing, and it's referencing that in this parameter called component. So I'm able to get that. And then that's that. I think I get the I from the digits of the container. So it's called container 1. So everywhere in here, it's going to look at row 1. I think this is it. So let me just get rid of this one and delete. No, delete. And now let's see if this works. I'm just going to kind of hide this away and assume it all works. Can I hide the actual? Oh, look at that. I can hide what's in it. So I've got these 4, and I think those make up a puzzle piece now. If I highlight this, copy and paste, again, there may be, if you watch the other video about how to, maybe make a 2D game in Touchdesigner, I think I was showing you the replicator, which is starting to look familiar now. You could use a replicator comp to kind of take this chunk of code and replicate it as many times as you want and have based on what's in the table. But in this case, I'm just trying to keep it simple. Copy and paste. We can all understand that. I've copied it, I've pasted it, and I put a different color. And is it going to work is the question. Let me make sure this is enabled and this one's enabled. And they should both be able to move independently. The orange one snaps there. The blue one does not snap there, but does it snap in the right place? Yes. So I've made it so that the code that's in here works based on whatever container number it is attached to. So container 2 is referenced in the code. It doesn't actually show up in the code because I got rid of all of the references to container 1 or container 2, and I'm instead deriving them from by looking in turn to find out which container we're dealing with. So I should be able to, if I just scale that down again and hide its name, I should be able to do the same thing for a third one. Again, if we're using a replicator comp, it could actually, every time I add something in here, it could just recreate another whole set of operators, but it's not too bad. This is interesting anyway, that I can maintain the numbers here, and then I can just make a new, copy and paste these 4, and they'll look it up in the table. So let me do a green. I'll do the same numbers here just so I don't have to think too hard, but it's going to land in the same place as the blue one. So let me just do one more. I'll copy and paste this, and I'll make this one green, and make sure these are all enabled so they can all move. There's that one. There's that one. The blue one snaps into place. The green one doesn't snap here, but it should snap there. So there you go. Hopefully that helps. I feel like I should go one step further and make the replicator work, but this is good enough. I feel like this is not a very complicated situation, and seeing all these, the disappointing thing about the replicator comp is it still makes all of these things show up in the network. So it's not like you're saving real estate or making it look less confusing. The only difference is that adding a line here would automatically do the copy and paste for you. So this is a pretty good solution, I think. All right, take care.